How's everybody doing tonight? We get checked in, good. Amazon contacted me today. They said shipment for the next 7 days, so that's good news. Thanks for your patience. Just got through updating all the installs of Android Studio tonight, so I've been here since about 11:30 doing updates, and so I feel your pain times 16. All right. All right. Let's see here. Loops, for loops.
Oh, you know, on that reading, like we were talking about,
Mm-hmm.
I think it gives you so many tokens, and then after that,
You're done.
buy it.
Okay.
I think it
Okay.
was like 20 or something. So
Oh, okay.
20 clicks.
20 clicks, done.
And then, yeah,
All right. I didn't do 20.
that's what I ran into.
Okay. This week, we're going over while and for loops, exceptions in Kotlin. And as far as the loops and exceptions are pretty much like other applications, other development applications. One of the differences is, scroll down to find one here. The while loop. While a condition is true, it's going to do something. And then this one has a while and then a do loop. After that one goes from false, you'll go into the do. Another update on Kotlin is the range values using the dot operator when you're doing a range of values between one number and an n number on like a for loop. So give an example here. So we've got your function, fizzbiz is an integer with a when, uses a when to implement. And it's going to basically be like a case select in C++, VB, JavaScript. But it's called when in Kotlin. And basically you've got in here a modulus, 1, 2, 3 modulus operators. If that int matches that range of operator, that operator, fizz, biz, fizz, or buzz, if it hits that modulus. Else, it just comes back with whatever it was that was entered in. The for loop goes through the iteration. I'll click on the edit there so we can see that. So on the for loop in the main, it's doing an I and I dot 1 dot 100, so 1 to 100. It's going to print and go to the fizzbiz or fizzbuzz function 100 times. And so let's see here the results here on this. So it starts out with the 1, 2, fizz, 4, buzz, fizz, 7, 8, fizz, buzz, 11, all the way through. Finally ends up at 98 is the last one. And it's on the buzz and buzz on that one. And step by, which you're familiar with other language, they have a difference of doing it a little bit different in Kotlin. Is you have in here in the main, it's doing I and 100 down to 1 step by 2. So this you can go down to and up to in the ranges. Same concept. So it's starting at 100 and going down instead of incremental, going up, using the down to operator or function name, method name. And another language would be step by, plus plus, negative negative, things of that nature. So pretty much the same, just different syntax. And this one's pretty interesting on the iteration over maps, initializing and iterating maps. And basically on this one, it's using two for loops within a main, but the map is actually brought in from a Java import, a tree map that brings in a char and a string. And so this one's doing multiple for loops. It's calling it binary reps at the end to give the binary of each one of the loops. First is A through F. And then down here, it's going to put it in another letter, whether it's binary or not binary. A binary equivalent of it. So the letter A, that's a binary equivalent ASCII code of A all the way through F. And it's using this tree map to bring in that binary equivalent, and that's a built-in Java library. Again, so Kotlin can use a Java and does use and built upon Java, just different language. Okay, that's all I want to cover on that one. The second reading is exceptions, which I think is important on when you're first starting coding, to put in some catches for exceptions, throwing in and handling exceptions. So good programming rule, if you have a function or a group of code, you want to make sure and have some type of try catch in there to catch that exception. Like an illegal exception, they put in the wrong value, a wrong value is inputted, possibly. It can catch it, tell the user they entered in a wrong input, wrong value, like say between 0 and 100 in this case. So in this one, it's actually a throw statement, and it's actually called throw, and then whatever the construct is, in this, it's a legal argument exception. In other languages, it'd be just the word exception. This is a legal argument exception is what it's called. Try catch finally. This is probably the most popular to do on all types of programming languages, from C to C++ to VB to Java. So basically you have, in this case, in this little app, you got two import statements for reader, buffer reader, and a string reader. In the main, it's bringing in a buffer string of 239, reading it, and then printing it out in the read number function. In the try area, it's going to try that and return an integer. Well, if this isn't an integer, it should catch. It should error out, which this one is. All right, so if we put in there, I don't know. There you go. So it catches the error nicely, and a message, the app doesn't blow up, basically, is what I call it. The app doesn't blow up. You don't want the app blowing up, and so putting catches throughout, and it's easier as a programmer to put catches in as you're programming and not later. You understand what I'm saying? Now, I guess I'll back up a little bit. When you're debugging your app and figuring out how something works, that's not the area of time I'm talking about. I'm talking about when you know something works yourself and it's functional, then you start debugging it by putting in values like I just did to see if you can crash it, see if you can make it not work. And so that's when you want to put your try catches in. Make sense? Because if you ran it without the try catch, it would just do an illegal operation, stop the application. A little error would pop up in the app, and basically you just say error. Might give you some error number or error warning. Might make sense, might not make sense to the user. And so by catching a return in an error, like this one's returning null, you could actually return a message like you entered in the wrong value or something like that as well. But this just returns the word null. Okay, so the big difference from between Java is that throws clause isn't present in the code. If you write this function in Java, you'd explicitly write throws IO exception after the function declaration. You'd need to do this IO exception as a checked exception. And in Java, it's an exception that needs to be handled explicitly each time. You have to declare all checked exceptions in Java when it throws an error. If you call another function, you need to check also for its exceptions. So basically, it has to be redeclared over and over again. Kotlin doesn't differentiate between checked and unchecked exceptions. You don't specify exceptions thrown by a function. You may or may not handle exceptions. That may or may not handle exceptions. This design decision is based on the practice of using checked exceptions in Java. Experience has shown that Java rules often require a lot of meaningless code to rethrow, or I call reinitialize the code for the exceptions. And you don't need to do that in Kotlin. Goes on, talks about an example of number format exception isn't a check exception. And I'll click on that there. So there it is right there. The number format exception is not a check exception. And so you'll see here in the try catch, it does an E number format exception. Well, it isn't a check exception. Therefore, Java compiler doesn't force you to catch it. But in Kotlin, you can use it, and things will fail more smoothly if they do fail in your code. One of the other things it shows in this listing here is a finally, which I've not talked about. So you got the try. In fact, when you type in the word try, left bracket, hit enter, Kotlin's going to put in IntelliSense the two other paths, and you can type those in, the return value. And so try catch will be the default, and then you need to put in whatever the exception might be for. The finally is even if you have a return catch, finally still runs. And this is good for database connections. So when you open up a database to use it, whether you read it, write it like we'll do here, or just like an input-output database, like a text file or a SQL database, if you don't close out the database, it stays open, as you might know. And so the finally catch helps it always close whether the function is successful or not with the try catch. That makes sense? So you got the tries that statement. If it fails, it goes to the catch, returns whatever, and it still goes to the finally every time, 100% of the time, whether it be true or false in the path.
Is that a time thing after so much time? Like if someone opens up a file, walks away, forgets to close it, it's going to close it in a certain amount of time?
Well, if it's a built-in exception that closes it, it would, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, but if it's, it would have to catch an error. Runs very quickly. So there is no time in between the try and the finally. So do I know?
You could have a time.
You could put a pause in there, or a pause statement, which we'll talk about this semester. You can do that in Kotlin. Or a loop to finish something, like in your case, maybe I'm just thinking out loud, waiting for a website to load. Once it loads completely and downloads, then it does something else in the finally. Okay, like setting a Boolean statement or something like that. And so, but yeah, it's a good question. And so, yeah, it's going to compile though pretty quickly. If it's true, it'll write to the finally. No real pause at all. Try as an expression in this next section talks about significant difference here between Java and Kotlin again. So if you remove the finally section totally, which you don't have to have a finally in a try catch. You can just have try catch and no finally. Some code you might want to put in there to print the number that you read from a file. So an example here you'll see on this function here, it does val number equals, and then here's a try catch here. Let me go to the edit to get easier. So here's a try catch here. And so you'll notice in this try statement, if the integer does not parse correctly for this read line, it's going to catch it and just do a return. But it'll also still, for the developer standpoint, because you'll see this in the console of Android Studio. It'll print out what that number was that it aired out on, or whatever that value was that it aired out on. It's not going to be an integer. It'll be something. So let's run that to show you. So in this case here, in the main, it's doing a val of reader, and it's putting in a string, not a number. So it should fail coming back, but it should still also get us a print line as well. Just something else in there. Down. Let me go ahead and copy this. And I'm going to put it in. I'm pausing sometimes. While this is loading, make sure at home when you're updating your Android Studio, again, can't stress enough. Like today, I had 35 updates per computer or something like that. That had to be updated. I know I've told you that each week, but you just need to keep up on it each day. It is annoying. I told you it would be annoying. And so, okay, but it's just the nature of Android Studio. It's going to be that way for a while. It's the nature of Android. So anyway, let's go ahead and log in. I'll log in and throw that little app in here. We'll see if we get that error to show up here, or that good error show up anyway, the return value. All right, so let me put in a number in there. Okay. Looking for expected string. Okay, this one's expecting a string in this buffered reader on the string reader, and then when it goes to the read number here, that's when it's going to go to this function and bring in the buffer reader and to try parse. So I'm going to go ahead and put in here the one that should fail safely. That's what it's doing then. There we go. All right, so it is failing safely and coming through. So even though this fails, it's still printing out the line. Good, 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 good. Because it is a number, but it's in the string format, so good. So that's try catch. Let me go to one more example here. I like this one here too. That's the same one. Yeah, it's the same one. No number, string reader, yeah. Let's see, I'll put that. Yeah, that's fine. All right, cool. All right, let's get into some coding then here. In week 3 in class, let's go ahead and go into that. This one, I put a podcast out there already. If you didn't see it, you can watch it outside of class, but we'll do this together in Android Studio, just kind of play with it. Basically, it's a pretty simple app. I'll fire up the online one to look at first. Appetizo. We'll play with that one. Look how the end result should be anyway. So basically, you just put in two numbers. There is no catches in this one, by the way, and it calculates and puts it here on the bottom label. Is all it does. So what you're going to do is in Android Studio, whether you're using one computer here in the lab or your own laptop, you're going to create an Android app in Android Studio. Make sure and check Kotlin. It's going to ask the user to enter two numbers in via two edit text objects. An add button that goes to a function that returns the sum of two values and puts it in a text view. The object names, two edit text objects, the IDs are text num1, text num2, txt num1, txt num2, vtn add, text property add for add, and then below the button, a text view with ID txt show, and text property set out to null or no text at all in there. So when the user enters, they're going to tap the button, which will go to the sum function, come back and return and show the example of the output. All right, so I'm going to fire up Android Studio. I'll do it with you, along with you if you like. All right, let me close mine out here. I had one open already. Okay, so creating a brand new Android Studio project. And we'll call the application name week 3 in class, all one word. Doesn't really matter on syntax. Company name student.rbc.edu or something like that. And then make sure and check mark Kotlin support and click next. Whatever's there on the, make sure check marked is iPhone or the phone and tablet, and then click next. We're going to do an empty application. Click next. And then click finish. So very first two things we're going to put in the very middle of the screen is two text views, text edit views, edit text views, a button, and then below that, a text view. And then we'll have to initialize those in the main in Kotlin, initialize those and bind them basically as objects. And then we'll create a function for the add for it to be called to. All right, so as soon as this pops up here, we're going to go to the app and expand it. Go to res, layout, and double click activity.main, main.xml.
I was just going to ask, were we supposed to use the default one for the API since that one said
Yeah, whatever the default one's fine. Yep, that'll work. Going on. Oh, on the screen, yeah, it is. But that screen is like dirt. It's really small. It's hard to read. That's a good one. I had talked about Pop. But by the way, we did Android Studio. I'm going to have Dev install in the Mac Lab, and he just mentioned it's a good point. The screen's very almost impossible. It's best to watch a podcast afterwards because it's so terrible to read. So we will work on that. Best case or worst case that we're going to look at, we might just install them all. You guys have finished MacLab down there. We got enough seats up there for everybody. So we might just install it in Android Studio and do that. Yeah. With Android Studio?
Yeah. So so I believe that might have
I would use this machine for now until I get a chance to do that. Okay, let me see here, by the way, if I can make this a little bigger for you guys before I go on the screen. I don't know if it'll help or not. We'll try. Resolution at scale. Let's do. Tell me if this is getting any better or worse.
That's at least readable.
Is it readable? Well, let's go one more. But it's not. But we'll fit it. So we'll keep it at that. So go further. Might not be able to fit everything on the screen. Can you read that any better? Is that better? Okay, cool. All right. So let's move some stuff around here. So what we're going to do first is we're going to put in. Click on the text palette. Click on the text palette. We're going to bring in. Let's go ahead and bring in the two of the number ones. I guess we could to force it to make sure it's a number. That'd be fine. It's still going to be edit text, but it'll just validate that it's a number. Also, before we do anything, I need to delete that label that's in there. Delete that hello label. All right, so I got one. Let's go put another one in. Then I'll put a button underneath that. And make sure when you're putting your objects in here, you try to get them centered with the little line, vertical line showing up. And we'll do the infer in just a second. And then go back to text, and we're going to put in a text view at the bottom, which is for output. Let's make the text view a little bit wider. And let's see the the text on the bottom. Let's get rid of that on the text property that says text view. I want to get rid of that. And let's see here. I think it was txt number 1 on the top one, right? Txt num1. The next one below that, txt num2. Then the button, btn. What did I say? Submit? Is that right? btn submit? Or add, I think. Whatever. Either one will work. I'll do submit line. I think I put in the instructions add. I'll do btn submit. Then in the text property for button, I'm going to put in the word add. Down on the text property. Okay, now I want to select all my objects with my mouse. Just select them like I'm on the overhead. Click and select them. You'll loop them with your mouse. And then you're going to go up here to the magic wand, the infer constraints, and click on that. And then it should lock everything in for, regardless of what size of phone it's being played on. Okay, next, we need to go to the manifest. So expand your manifest, and let's go double click on the Android manifest.xml. Sorry, I don't want to go to manifest. I'm going to go to Java. Go to the Java folder, and the very first one at the top, which is the main.activity, this one right here, I'm highlighting on the overhead. That's the one you want to go to. There we go. So let's go ahead and do this first. Let's go ahead and bind our operators here. I'm going to go ahead and bind them the same name that they are right now. Var txt num1 equals, and then just type in the word find, and it should pop up. Your IntelliSense should pop up, and you'll see find by ID. Double click on that. And nobody tell me what type of object this is. Edit text. So we're just going to type in cap E, lowercase d, and you'll see it pop up there and double click on it. And then in the parentheses, capital R period, ID lowercase period, and then txt num 1, right parentheses, and do the same for the num2, and the same for the button, and the same for the view, text view. If you want to copy and paste it like I do, it might be a little easier. Just have to change the types on the button. And I'll name the bottom one. Oh, text view. I'll leave it up there for a second.
All this is in your podcast as well. That you made?
Do what now?
All this is in the podcast.
Yeah, yeah, it's going in right now.
Is the text view one supposed to be called text show or?
You want to know? Mine was. I called mine text view. I'm sorry. I called mine that.
Okay,
I did.
well,
You might have called yours something
I
different.
mean, you put where text show, and then in the ID it says text view.
Yep.
Is
Yeah,
that right?
I just called the variable text show. In a second here, I'm gonna put the others up here for you. Let's see. Text one. Okay, let's see if I can blow this up a little bit more now. I know it warned me earlier, but I'm gonna see if I can still do it. Ooh, it's a little bit bigger. Better, worse? Better, worse? Better? Okay. So then what you're going to do is you want to go ahead and put in the btn submit dot set on click listener. Now that's a button click. We're not going to use this toast one right now, but I'll get rid of that one. And then inside the btn click submit click event is valuing two variables. I call it n1, n2 from the text1 num and num2. And then doing a text show with a set text, calling the calculate function, and calling to n1 and n2 variables that they typed in, then clearing out the upper two text boxes, putting a focus on the first text box, and then hiding the keyboard. I forgot to put a toString in here before the two int. You can't convert a string to an integer until you put the string in. I didn't put that as a string first. There we go. On this these two lines here, line 25, 26, when you're bringing in the variables, right now it's a nothing. It's just an object. Text num1 dot toString dot toInt. Then that converts that line to an integer. And I'm putting it explicitly converting it here as well with the integer variable type. And the hide keyboard, I don't know if you saw that or not. That function, by the way, in the helps menu, each time I'll leave it. Each time I just copy and paste it from my library. But recommend you to do the same because you're going to need a hide keyboard in all of yours. All right, once you get those in, anybody need me to keep that up a little bit more to type it in? Okay, you're good. You're fine. let me do this too. Does everybody have the variables done? Through line 20. What I might do is put this in a bigger document.
What does it say next to set text?
This right here.
Yeah.
It's basically a set text. Left parentheses, two quotes, beginning quote, end quote, right parentheses. It just clear out the text box for num1 and num2 on the set text. I'll throw it in a Word document here and see if it can get bigger for you. You should get a little, if you didn't already do the IntelliSense input, you might got a little bubble there on the function hide keyboard to bring in the import statement for the input method here at the top. Input service method, maybe. Might have asked you for that. I'll leave those two functions there. That might help. Maybe a little bigger anyway. And that function is also right from that help file in our modules. If you want to copy it from there, if you don't want to type it in, it's up to you. Not too hard once you start typing in, but. So function, while you're still typing that in, is going to bring in two arguments. In the argument for the function is bringing in two integers called a and b, and the whole function itself will return an integer value. The hide keyboard is going to be called at the very end to hide the keyboard of the user. Every app should have that as well. The one input statement that's going to be brought in for the keyboard automatically, if you don't have it checked already on your Android Studio, is the two imports actually. One for android.content.context for this line here that says context, and then import android.view.input method which is for this one right here, this input method service as input method manager. That needs to be imported as well. But generally, even if you don't have the check mark to import them automatically, Android Studio, if you sit there long enough while you're typing, the little light bulb will come on. If you click on it, it'll tell you what needs to be imported, and you can just click on it and it'll import it for you. That's probably the best way to do it. That way you won't miss it, and it won't let you compile it anyway without the import in there anyway. The other thing I'll mention, some students have talked about this, and you've probably noticed it. When you're running Android Studio, I wouldn't run anything else on your computer. Nothing. Very little bit. You know, your Eagle stuff's fine, but don't be watching movies and playing music because it's just gonna really dogs it down. It uses almost 100% of your processing power. The beauty is when you do get your Android devices, they do have an app on the App Store you might have seen for built-in. You can basically, it's a built-in compiler on the. It's an Android app built-in compiler, Kotlin compiler, to where basically you can do compiling stuff on your use your Android, maybe use your Android device as a monitor to look at the tutorials and videos and stuff and references for your reading, and then just use your laptop or desktop to do the actual coding work. That might be good. And the other cool thing, if you haven't already read up a little bit on Android Studio devices or devices connected to Android Studio, if you're on a LAN at home, which most of you are, how many have Wi-Fi set up at home? Once you have it set up at home, you can actually connect to your Android device via Wi-Fi, and so it can be anywhere in your house, and you can connect to it from Android Studio, and it'll compile remotely through your Wi-Fi. So that's kind of cool. Once you have all this typed in, you should be able to. I would recommend doing a clean and a build. And let me just quickly go to the Android Studio file. On your menu item up here at the top of Android Studio, I always do this on the build menu. Go down to clean, and then let it clean, and then build. Okay, clean and then build.
Do you do that like with every change after?
Well, an example was example tonight, Ron. I did the updates on these machines.
Mm-hmm. It's got it in the reading somewhere too, I think.
Yeah. Every time you do an update, I do a clean build. Every time I open an app up, I do a clean build. It's just I do it even in iOS as well, and in Windows app development, I do that as well. Something can happen all the time. What happens is what that clean does, by the way, it cleans out the APK and all the DLL and library files for Android Studio for Android apps to run. And if that could get junked up pretty easy. That bin folder can, and so the clean cleans all that out and starts it from fresh, basically. And a lot of times too, it'll wipe out your Android Studio emulator. We'll have to restart again. Yeah. That's fine too. It takes a little bit longer.
Cleaning that out if you've got a bunch of them built.
Yep.
To limit it to like maybe one or two.
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So you're helping yourself. Right?
It does help. Yep. It does clean a little bit better if you do that as well. Anybody still typing this in? Raise your hand so I'll keep that up there. All right. Yeah.
Pretty much gets this in service and current focus is right.
Okay, you've got a little you've got a light bulb there. Click on it for me. Notice it says here, remove the very defined by okay, you got too many. You don't need spaces there. The r.id, there's no spaces in between the r.id. Yeah, I'll get rid of those. And the reason the btn submit is highlighted is you haven't declared it here as a btn click statement. And I'll bring that up on the overhead. I'm going to switch screens so he can get this here on the overhead. So I'm going to put that button click in there too, guys. Okay, the button submit you're missing on your code. btn submit.set on click. Let's remember that's for fire the button click when they tap the button. That's what that is for.
Especially my emulator says magnification keeps stopping. Open it up again, it goes back forward.
Stop. Okay, you got the on create, BTN submit. Just some of your code. Yeah, right here. You message actually on the BTN submit on second on quick listener. There's quite a bit more in there. It's needed, and also you need the two functions below that. Fun calculate and the fun high keyboard. Left bracket, right bracket. What now? Yeah, that's when you named it here in the activity on name. Should be that. Yeah, that's good.
Is this making this extra?
I would do that, yeah, BTN after that. So,
Oh, God, yeah. I see you when you have me. You need 40 programs installed. Next.
yeah, but yes, just an update. Yeah, that should fit, and then picture come below that, right, match it. You call it BTN add, I call mine BTN submit, so y'all try it. That's all available, BTN submit's all available.
What if you're literally putting on every computer in
Oh, what else?
I had an extra bracket and so it was it was getting confused because it was like I don't see a main function.
Ah. It didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I've got my things set. So. Yeah, it's downstairs. At least if you got the projector readable.
Okay. Right. 15 EXT. There you go. Now we're looking better. And then column calculate. Calculation is calc. Calculate. Function just called. Well, it's called calculate.
Oh, I got it.
Okay. There we go. You want to get looking good? Yep. Do a clean and build again. Do a clean and rebuild. Build, yep. And do a clean project. And do build. And project. Done. There we go. Let's just go and try to run it. Well, we'll put your cursor on that. Yep. You have the import statement. Put your cursor over that input as input underscore method underscore service. Go to the top two. That's the input method manager. Okay. Oh, yeah, 50, yeah, you got exception. 50, colon, yeah, 3 colon. Yeah, caps E on exception. Exception. Anytime you guys see red text, that means it's not good. Now, go click on the next one. That should be nothing here.
Maybe that's what he showed us how to the
That's just request focus, you have that, right?
But it's all lined up in the wizard. Select everything.
Yeah, now time mismatch on that one.
Yeah, I had to install everything so it.
Doesn't the function have an integer on the end of it? See where it says, see at the end of the function calculate? If you don't put that int on there, it's going to return it. Doesn't know what to return. We just colon int. There's that one. Then I'll go around again. Reference input method. That's all right. Input method manager.
There's a way to auto lay this thing out. I hit the auto layout button with Jack.
Oh yeah. Let me bring up the input statements real quick for everybody. Input statements, import statements. I'm sorry. I think you might be missing an import and context one. Scale one up to top.
The amount of import you have here is
Yeah,
insane.
And it was worse than Java.
Oh,
Worse than Java.
Anything that you can ever do with a button there.
Now, as you type, it'll do IntelliSense for you. It's Android.content.context. It should help you there. Yeah, the next one is content lowercase. Yeah, and then content uppercase. It's context. Dot. Yep, input method services. all caps with an underscore in between method and service. And references. No references. It's going to be easy. There we go. Now go run it. Make them all the way around here. Go click on that. If the word context, you have a cat C. Yeah, that one should not be cap C, I don't think. Sorry about that. Okay, let's see. There we go, right there. Context dot input method as input method manager. All on the same line. Put it on the same line. Make sure it understands it. Also, do you have on an import statement android.content.context? Import android.content.context. You do? This one right here. You got that one? Because that would make sense of it firing an error on that context word, because you don't have the import for context maybe at the top. It's this one right here. Import android.content.context. And I know I'm helping others while we're doing this together, so you guys are getting help too, I know. Yeah. And as I've been doing with him on his, when you run and compile it, Android Studio will tell you what's wrong, what's going on, where you can fix it, which is fine when you're learning. It's good to do that. Don't, it'll give you the error and, okay, you need to fix this. Okay, that's wrong spelling, whatever. Which one is it? Yeah, put the imports back yeah, definitely. And I put that content.context at the very top of my import, the last one I put in there. Okay, go ahead and here and see what's happening. Okay, double click on the type mismatch. Go to course conference. Click on the bottom. Yeah. That's OC. That's OC. It's the bottom of that. Something was different. Okay, let me help you out here, everybody, just to save time here. You're doing good, doing great. I'm going to help you out a little bit here as far as the syntax goes on this. Couple things as I was walking around. Basically, the import statements need to be. It'll mind you that as you compile it each time if you don't have an import statement. Like for instance, I'm gonna take one of these out just to show you. I'm gonna comment out that import context one here. I'm gonna go ahead and compile the code again. I didn't clean it, so I might still remember it, but we'll find out. And that's another thing too. If you don't clean your code and you change something in Android Studio, sometimes it will still remember what you changed before. If you don't clean, it'll still use what you changed before, what you had before, basically. Yeah. So let me go ahead and see it put it back in. Put it back in. I did auto import, so I put it back in. That's a bad example. Let me rename this to cap lowercase c. Let's do that. That'll work. Do I know? Yeah, I'm gonna come back and look at that. If you look at the context reference, see how it says context is wrong here? Well, I just changed it from cap C to lowercase c. Now I'm gonna go ahead and do a clean and then just play it again. And I'll get all this code here. I've already got it in our GitHub already, but I just want to copy and paste what I've updated this a little bit from what I had earlier. You guys can use that. Hmm.
I also want my text box.
Hmm. Yeah, mine's closing abruptly like some of yours. I'm seeing if I can figure out what's causing it. Okay, so it's working now. All right. I think what it was. Okay, the ID text view. That's the culprit on mine. I call my ID text view, which is actually an object name or the object type. So that caused mine to blow up. By the way, if you do this, and I had somebody do this earlier, if you rename an object on your form, if you want to update the usage, what that does is it goes back to your code. It'll update that as well for you. So now I rename this to txt view. Hopefully now we go back to the KT file. There it is. It updated it. I think that was the txt view I had called something weird, text view or something it was. Yeah, I think it's what it was. I believe so. So I'm going to rename it to txt show and get rid of that. There we go. That should do it. I think that's what mine was pulling up on. But my other in class I did earlier didn't do that. And I think it's because I mistakenly named it the name of the object. So don't name the ID the object reserved name. Don't do that. That blows it up. So let's see if this does any better. And then I'll give you this code here. Now, what else I got going on here? TXT show, TXT view. Bless you. Explain explicit type. Yeah. Maybe I'm not, but it's explicit. And also the call statement too. Let's do this. Text operator. Yeah, on the text view, I don't need to do a set text. I need to do a dot text on the text view operator. Did that wrong too. I just caught that. I did a set text here on my text view. Total on that. Man, I must be really beat today. Forgot my text property too here. After the text num and num2. So this value here, this text property num112 should have a .text, .toString, .toInt. Didn't have the text property in there. Blow it up. Doesn't know what the value is. There we go. Okay, let's see. I think I did a little different here. Let's see. Boom, boom, boom. Forget on that. Okay. I'm going to do this. I'm going to run it one more time. Copy it, paste it, put it in GitHub, and have you guys look at it and copy it that way. How's that? All right. Let me run it to make sure it's working. And I'll tell you what I did wrong on mine. Okay, so it's clearing out, functional. Okay, first thing I did wrong. First thing I did wrong was I named the object type ID. The ID I named txt_view. I named that object text view on the front end GUI. Don't do that. Second thing I did was the text properties for the num1, num2. I did not put in the text object type. Bring two in, but I didn't do that. Text object type. I changed this around when I didn't need to, but I'll show you what I did. I created a value called showCalc as an integer and called that calculation function. And then I show it in the text show, which by the way, I had that. That was my fourth one I did wrong. I had that as a set text. A text view, when you're viewing stuff on a text view, it's a .text, not a set text. A set text is going to be used if you want to overwrite the text box for an input text box, like the number, text, whatever. You have to use a set text for that. TXT won't work. But for text view, which views only, you can't input on that one. It's TXT. And to bring in a string, concatenate a string in a variable. See that? You got here the sum is, and then dollar symbol, and then brackets for that variable. And then that should show, that'll show the sum is, in my case, last one was 4. Clears the two text boxes here, puts the focus back on text 1, and then clears the keyboard or hides the keyboard. So that's what I did wrong on mine. So let me go ahead and copy this, and then I'll put this out there real quick on Hub. Real quick to make sure you can get it. And the one we did tonight in class is called Week 3 in Class Demo 2. Week 3 in Class Demo 2 is the one I'm committing to GitHub right now. And I'll put a link in Week 3 in Class real quick. And this is being recorded too. All my mistakes are recorded. You can watch them over again. Hey, you learn by failing. You learn by failing in coding. You already know that. If you don't, you'll learn it. Let's see here. So let me go ahead and edit this 3 in class. I'm going to replace that GitHub link I have in there now with this new one we did in class. That's okay. I'll do that. And let me show you for those. I know some are not familiar with GitHub. I know some of you are. For those of you that are not familiar with GitHub, let me show you how to download that file later. And you don't need to do it right now. If you don't want, we'll do it when you get home or something. If you look on the overhead, here is the link to the, when you go there anyway, in 3 in class. If you go to that GitHub repo, if everybody will go there with me right now, I'll show you how to download this later as a project. So when you go to the GitHub repo, to get to the file that we needed tonight, to correct your file tonight, to get the files here on GitHub, you just want to correct stuff and don't want to download it. If you click on the app folder in that repo, click on app, then SRC, and then we want to go into the main. And then we want to go into the Java folder, Java edu RVC folder. And then you should set that main activity.kt file. That's the one that has all the code in it that we did tonight, that I did tonight in mine. Okay, I'll go over that again, how I got there. When you go to this repo, first folder you go into is app. That's easy to remember. Then second, source, SRC. Then third, main. Then anytime you see Java, you're getting close. The Java folder. Then there's your KT file. That is the file that most time on. Has all your import statements. This drives the ones on the main objects on your form. So if you named your conventions different than me or your different objects, you'll have to correct that. But the code is at least functional as it stands. And I'll let you play with that. The challenge for this one for your in class, when you update yours, and you don't have to do it tonight before you leave, features like images, functions, validation. So the try catches will be good in there for validation. Notice on the input validation for numbers, since I used a number field type, if you notice I'm trying to type in a letter key actually right now, and it just won't let you do it. So that's a nice thing about using a number, just a plain text one. If you nice thing I like about Android over other languages, maybe like iOS, you had to go in there and validate your own function to validate a number. They actually have objects for validation, in this case, a numeric validation. And so when I type in a number, it lets me. The one thing it doesn't do, though, it doesn't catch it. It doesn't tell the user, please enter a number. They could hit in a letter all day and it won't do anything. So what you might do as an extra challenge is, hey, I want to put a try catch in there. If it's not a integer, then I want to put a message telling the user to put in a number instead of whatever it is that they put in. Okay. And by the way, in the podcast I did for this week for the in class, I show, and we talk about this next week in week 4, how to use what's called a Gradle. A Gradle is a little pop-up that comes up at the bottom, or not Gradle. Mine's brain's dead. Toast, not Gradle. Toast. Toast is pops up at the bottom of the app and shows a message, and you can use Toast in Android. So that was a solution that I found on mine. So let me go back to the main next page. So your assignment is not an Android app. Your assignment is your try Kotlin, where you're going to go in and do a week 3 try Kotlin, create a week 3 try Kotlin. You're going to have the user, you create a function named presentation that gets a char input of the first name, last name, and returns which day of the week is their turn to present before their peers. Here's the example. So in the function, it's going to say the last name begins A through Z, or A through D is going to be presented on Monday, E through J you present on Tuesday, K through Q you present on Wednesday, so on and so forth. Here's the example. I'll show you real quick. And I am going to come around and help each other, by the way, one by one, so don't close everything down yet. So once this loads up here, plug in, I'm going to die out here. faster in Firefox when loading on Chrome. Everybody's probably clicking on at the same time. Come on, there we go. Yay. Okay, so here we go. Here's a function called recognize. It's a char function, only accepts the char only, and that's determined right here. Input char only. And remember, the when loop is a lot like what in other languages? Remember that earlier? What type of, not an if. Yep, case select. Where they have different case selects you can select from. In this case, it's going to select 0 through 9 or an A through Z. What's being sent to this function is a digit or it's a letter or I don't know. And so there, so I'll go ahead and run it. It's going to send that to the function. And it says it's a letter. Let's change it to a number. 2. I have to put in quotes because it needs a char. Single quotes. It's a digit. Let's try at symbol. Don't know. Okay, so because it's a char value, again, on this example, on any char value, separated or enclosed by single quotes, not double quotes. Single quotes, not double quotes. And so that's an example to help you. If you take my example, you can build on that to get what you need for your in class, which is this right here. You're saying it to a char, but it's what the last name ends with. The tricky part on this, only tricky part is make sure, tell the user to enter in either lowercase or uppercase. And then when you do that, you need to also put in that lowercase or uppercase as far as in the range. That makes sense? So it can't just be, an uppercase A, lowercase d, that won't work. And so it has to be same case, but let the user know that when they're inputting their values. Make sense? All right, let's see. So I'm gonna go around real quick, so hang tight. I know I helped a couple of you on this side. I'm gonna start on this side over here and see how you did on your in-class issue. Okay. Okay. What about you? All right, sweet. Good job. And if you got it, great. If you didn't, that's great too. You'll get it.
I was able to run it.
That's okay. Don't worry about it.
I said I was able.
You was able to run. All right, great. That's good. That's the old go back one. Keep going. Hit on RBC indoor class. RBC indoor class. Then go to the one that's no, it says updated 11 days ago. That's not it. So keep going down. Refresh that page so you see it.
Yeah, I had to do that too.
In fact, go to the link on week 3 in class. Refresh the page. I updated that link. Now click on it. It should take it. Yeah, there it is. And then click on app and so on and so forth. Good. What do I have to do back here? Not about it? Generate it up. Okay. Okay. Well, is this one, you got it running at the validation not working? That's fine. The interface looks good though. I like it. I like the interface. It's all lined up. That's all messed up. So review.
I finally got it. Well, even before I'm looking at all the code looks.
Now, did you fix the .txt and all this stuff like that?
So the end is
do this for me.
I started with Windows.
That's what it's doing. I don't know.
Do you have an end quote on that line? I can't see. Should have beginning and end quote. Anything for, yeah, anything for.
Well, both there. Some is.
Oh dear. No, I
I would do a clean build and then build it and clean it again. Yeah. What now? That's my old one up there. That's the right one. No, that's the right one. So you text me, that's correct. That's the right object. Yep, that's correct. That's correct. That's correct. Because we're bringing in or binding it to that value here, and we're using it here. All of these we're binding it and then using it here. Well, no, you might have named yours differently. You named yours text show in the form. Okay, so that's good. That's fine. You can do it that way. Yeah, because like I said earlier, if you named yours differently, mine, you have to correct your code. Okay. And you might have done that. Yeah. Okay, so on your set on listener input statements or import statements, let's make sure you have all that. Is it spelled correctly also? Make sure you have all those import statements there. And I'll make sure you're not set on click listeners like mine as well. Set on. What's after the word K? I see that. Something after the letter K. Let me see. Click. Is clicks? You put clicks listener? It's click individual. No S. Yay, now I'm ready.
I looked at it like 3 times. And I was like,
Yeah, it helps it out. Somebody buys it. I did the same thing. You want to? Okay. This one here, you'll notice on the import statements, some of them you do not have. They're unused, meaning you're not using yet. Because this one here, the edit text, starts with caps E, I believe. You have lowercase.
Yeah.
So caps E, just type in the caps E. Place everything in. Yeah, place it, yeah. See it's caps E, and then double click it. Caps E, caps T. So anytime you see red, those two things are happening. Could be happening. One is you brought in the wrong from the form right, wrong name. 2, you're declaring the wrong type. You're misspelling it usually. No, that text view is what that one's called. That's a text off text. And if you name yours TXT show on the form, just click on it, it'll show you. Right there. You have to name it something, that's why. You have to put something in there. Just type in a TXT show if you have in the code. Yeah, something has to be in there. Good, now go back to your KT file. Go below that line. Go type in TXT. Save it.
It's pretty good.
Width of this is the same.
There's the
I would change that to become add, to just add. Operator. And good. See what the name of this one is. Yeah, click yes, you want to update your code. Good. That's fine. That's good. For the next one. Good. For the last one. Okay, that's fine. Now go back to the KT file. Okay. And let's see now TXT shows available. Back up to that must not be the text moving. Must not be text.
Yeah.
That's edit. Yep, that's edit. Text edit. Good job, everybody over there. Oh, yeah, sure, yeah.
So like.
Text, well, text edit or text view is basically a read only to show. It shows values in there. Every one you have was input. You don't want that to be not going to put in there TXT show. There it is. Good number. Yes. Go to your KT file. Okay. No, that one's correct now. You should see it now. No, that's it. You have it in the text view.
Super strong. But it's really intuitive.
Up in the word T,
Once you figure out
the word T,
it's like, oh yeah, this is great.
you see it in there?
But hitting that point,
I think it's TE or TX. It's T. But that's on the T. Type in that, type in it. That's there we go. That's what earlier. Like I told you earlier, sometimes you don't do it clean, we'll do that. Good. Yep. Now the last one, the button looks like it's wrong too. The button starts with a capital B on the KT button. See it's red. Remember, all your objects always start with a capital letter. Always right. That's what we use. And it should also, if you have red, if you look at red, something's missing. It's an import statement. Doesn't have a reference to the body. So basically, just copy that line, copy that, and hit the line, space. Place TXT view button. SB. No button. Hold on. We just stop button. There you go. Double click on the mouse. Now that should go away on the button. That should go away. More button. Good. Now we get started. High keyboard function you don't have in there yet. So if you go back to our course conference, while I put the code up here, I can show you what we do. What's left. Go to our Eagle course conference on Eagle. Yep. And go to our week 3. Refresh that week 3 in class. Up the back one. Scroll down the bottom on the GitHub repo link. Well, just hit the app folder. The app folder there. Yep. And then the SRC. Main. Then you want to go to res. Go back up. Main. Double click on that. Then scroll down to the code that you don't have, which is the 2 functions. Function calculate and function high keyword calculate. Doesn't always know the last 2 regular labels, last 2 brackets. There you go. Go ahead and copy that. Back to your code, and file, and go basically after that bracket there. Nope. That bracket. See right here, this is the name. Put your cursor right here. See how that's exactly the name? See the code in next, yeah, right there. And you don't have an input statement. It says, oh, yeah, we're going to need it. Yeah, it's could not call the variable. Oh, that's going to be called the show tell. That's all right. Okay, so let's just run it as it is. So if you want to be in one import statement facility, which is a high keyboard, go back to the highlight all the import statements. Yeah. Well, and then pulling back to your code, paste all the imports. And then replace it with there we go. I'm going to do that. Play button, you run it. This is one thing we're wrong too. Go back to the code. This text shows, you make it text show. It has to be the exact syntax. See what's all lowercase. So we name that correct syntax. Good. Text show is all lowercase. You start with as caps. It's red, it means something wrong. Nope, not. It's just like this. TXT show. Good, now run it. Pick one at a time. And double click on the top there. On that find by, something wrong with that. After edit text, you're missing greater than symbol. Good. You're also missing, oh, you have left hand. Good. Again. I just fix one at a time. Good. That's fine. Load. put in 2 and 2. And click the button that's up there at the top. And did the sun come up?
Oh, yes, it did. Yeah, thank you, thank you.
All right, go ahead and stop the app. Clear, and go ahead, stop. Go back to the fixed activity main. And here we see it. So basically what it is. All right, see if that's any better. Click OK. How'd you do?
Got it running.
You're good?
That's just so I can pull it down.
Oh, yeah. Okay, gotcha. Easiest way to do it on the submission inside of Studio, you bring home with you. Just go to the file menu.
I already
You already exported? Okay, cool. So you have that.
just trying to find it. I searched it, so Windows won't tell me.
Oh, it's going to be in your documents folder, I think, or documents. Click on that. And click on the C drive. Just click on the point C. Go into, okay, you'll need to go into digital. In fact, if you go here, go ahead and export again for me. It'll have a link somewhere. It'll tell you where to go. Okay, so see where, I think it puts it in, keep going, puts it in Android Studios projects. Try the root of your C maybe. Student, yeah. Android Studio, no. Android Studio projects. See it? Android Studio projects. Right there. That's it right there. That's it. Cool. Yep. Go on. Did you get it up?
Oh,
yep. All right.
I had one more.
Yeah.
Question. I noticed that arrow operator, or did you showed it with the switch?
It's a pointer to another type or type of system. That's right there. What it is, it's a pointer saying, okay, if the catch is here, it's going to stop there and go there. Basically, it's a shorter way. If you remember in a case like this, where you went to a case like that, like an exit, or usually an exit or an NL. And here it's just that statement. Just that.
Okay.
That's all it is. It just says, okay,
So you only context.
yes, yeah, well, for the one, for the wins, specifically for the wins. Yep, and it just points
It
to
just-
that output.
I had no idea.
Yep, and it's a Kotlin too. Yep, so you wouldn't have seen it in other languages, literally about 6 months old. So, yeah. Yes.
What do we do when we're done?
You're good to go once you're done. I mean, I've helped some folks as I went around, kind of try to get with everybody. So you'll update your code on the A class that I put in on GitHub.
That's what I did.
You got the challenges out there. You don't have to do the challenges.
Log
But,
off or shut down?
no, just go ahead and log off because there's another class in here in about an hour. Good job.
Okay, so this here.
Yeah, do you mind if I bring your laptop up here?
Oh, yeah.
That'd be great. But I'll probably have to search that because I've not seen that one.
I wasn't sure with it. And then the other one, I might have to reload it to get that Kotlin one.
Okay.
That updated Kotlin.